I think we have a tremendous fascination with novelty as human beings, meaning we value things that are new over things that are familiar. And I think this is the reason we have cliches, right? We have that term cliche. It's a consequence of, and they may even be good, solid, helpful truths by which we can live. But we get to where we hear them so often and frequently without acting upon them. And I think that's the important part, is that we hear them without genuinely considering them and acting on them so as to allow them to have any meaningful impact on our lives, that we end up categorizing them as familiar, therefore unvaluable or less than valuable, and maybe even that cliche category. So I think this idea of our fascination with novelty leading to the creation of the category of the cliche in our heads, and then our wrongful assignment of that label to truths that may actually be quite valuable, can tie into this biblical concept of the unforgivable sin, or the sin which leads to death. The sin that is unforgivable is only unforgivable to the extent that we, as autonomous human beings that have free will and the ability to make decisions, choose to ignore the continual prompting by the Holy Spirit, the continual conviction over and over and over again, such to the point that our hearts become hardened, and we actually become nearly, if not completely, unable to respond positively to the draw of the Holy Spirit by consequence of our own decision. That sin becomes unforgivable simply because we create a heart posture in ourselves that is unable to request forgiveness, because we have now hardened ourselves so much, we have so repeatedly ignored the gracious conviction of the Holy Spirit and the leading in a different direction, that eventually we're numb, we're hardened, and we can't even hear from the Holy Spirit anymore. We don't even experience conviction anymore. And I think that is the danger of allowing ourselves to place very possibly valuable truths in the cliche box. I was listening to a video the other day where this I assume fairly young guy was calling in about his relationship, and he was getting some advice from like a radio show host, and he said, I just feel everything just feels really peaceful and calm and like normal, and I don't know if I should continue in the relationship. It just feels like we're married. What? So like this person, because of our culture, this person is the implication here, right, is that he values the excitement, the up and down, the roller coaster, the apprehension and the feelings and the what truthfully is infatuation that people often call love. He values that over the stability which literally the stability in the marriage relationship is the thing that gives rise to the family, and the family unit is the very thing that gave rise to Western civilization. It is the thing that allows for the perpetuation of Western civilization. And we've gotten so off course. We're so consumed with feelings that a young man who finds himself today in a stable relationship that sounds healthy and wonderful is concerned because it isn't what he sees depicted on TV shows and in movies and, on social media. What that tells you is the mind, the human heart, is always looking for something new. Part of being an adult and part of being a person who ends up having a happy, successful, stable life, you can't build a meaningful, helpful, God honoring, kingdom oriented, a life that blesses other people around you if you are constantly in the throes of emotional excitement and infatuation and all the feelings that come from new relationships, which are fun and exciting, but you can't build a meaningful or productive life on those things. I think we have to reject the idea that we're going to be led by those feelings. That feelings are a wonderful servant, but they are a very poor master. And our lives can go tremendously badly the moment we get that backwards and we begin to make feelings the master and let our feelings determine what our principles are going to be. Our principles are going to determine, honestly, the course and the direction of our lives. And if we will choose to predetermine how we're going to handle situations and predetermine the principles that we're going to live by and live a disciplined, intentional life built on God-ordained principles, then that is a strong foundation from which we can start to construct, the external parts of our lives. We can build a family, and you can work really hard at your job because you're stable. Your home life is good. You have a strong foundation. You can do life with your spouse, with a person who, because you guys both came together and said, hey, we're the kind of people who we don't make decisions based on our feelings. That's the whole point of commitment. If you could find a person to marry who created for you every day these infatuating, wonderful, euphoric feelings, then you wouldn't need commitment. Commitment exists because of the inevitability of those feelings going away, because of the inevitability of adversity in your marriage relationship. That's why you have commitment. And so commitment is, hey, listen, we're not going to be the kind of people who, when we each get mad at each other or when the feelings fade, we start looking for those feelings somewhere else. We're going to operate on predetermined commitments. And as we foster the type of relationship that comes from a commitment over time to those particular, I'm going to love my wife no matter whether I feel good or not. I'm going to get up and serve my wife. I'm going to come home to my wife. I'm not going to step out on my wife. I'm not going to have relationships with other women. I'm not going to do things that are inappropriate. I'm going to, in my mind and heart, I'm going to consider my decisions as I go throughout the day through the lens of, does this honor God? Does it honor my wife? And will it cultivate for me a life and a marriage which is the type of marriage which I wish to have? Because a lot of people, the problem is they think you can find a marriage. You cannot find a marriage. You have to create one. You can find a person fit to be a spouse, but not completely, because much of the becoming fit occurs in marriage. But it only occurs if you are both pointed in the correct direction at the beginning. Meaning, you have two people who are committed to loving one another and loving God. Not necessarily in that order, loving God and loving one another. And when you're committed to loving God first, when your spouse does something or is behaving in such a way that causes you to believe that they're not currently warranting your love, you lean on the fact that you're loving them because your first commitment is to God. When asked one of the teachers of the law asked Jesus, right, what's the most important commandment? He said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and he said the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself, saying you really can't do one without the other. They go together. But Loving God comes first because God is the source of it all, and he is the one who you can be loving for, even when your own emotions and the experiences that you're having in your particular relationship or marriage don't necessarily spur you on to feel as though you really love your spouse at that moment, right? And I say love using it in the colloquial sense that our current culture uses it, meaning infatuation, right? But love is not actually a feeling. Love is a decision. Love is a choice. Love is an action that you choose to engage in regardless of supporting feelings. The supporting feelings, however, the beauty of them is they do come as you cultivate the type of environment and life and situation within a marriage that brings them to life and brings them forth. And I will say, I think the thing that does happen though is that infatuation type feeling, the sort of euphoric feeling that we all sort of grew up in our modern world, our Disney World, era of thinking was love. That sometimes doesn't come back in the same capacity. It's replaced over time with a much more consistent, deep, meaningful, intimate type of love, or type of feeling, I'm sorry. And that more consistent, stable experience is the bedrock of the familial unit and then of society at large. That it all starts on top of that. It's built on that because that type of relationship, first committed to God, my undying commitment to God in the face of unsupporting feelings. Here's where I'm standing and I'm not moving. That is strong enough to then build a relationship with a fallible human being, my spouse, and her build a relationship with me, another fallible human being. And when we each inevitably falter and don't live up to the expectation, then we can each lean on our commitment to God in our marriage in order to have the chief aim of the marriage be the continuation of the marriage and the flourishing of the marriage through the continuation of the marriage. And then that provides a strong enough foundation on which man went out and created society, and you have stability in society and in communities, and then ultimately in nations, right? It's very, very important. And the fact that we 250 some odd whatever years into the United States have gotten to where we're so checked out of the consideration of important, meaningful, deep, principle-based ideas in favor of the adherence to what is now culturally normative pursuits of feelings and pleasure. It's both, I think, a deception by the enemy, if I can be a little spiritual about it. So it's nefarious in that sense, but it's also the consequence of a mishandling of the truth by previous generations and not talking to their children. You have to talk to your children. 2 or 3 generations ago, and for some families, some of you listening probably grew up in homes like this we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about religion, and we don't talk about money in this house. That is devastating to society. That it was culturally normative for a time, and even for some of you probably that are listening now, it probably still might be, that you don't discuss those things, even in your family. Your family with your mom and dad and the kids and grandparents and aunts and uncles, that's supposed to be the relationship that is so strong and that is so consistent and reliable in your life, that's where you derive those understandings of those particular very, very important and fundamental aspects of life and reality. And we are now seeing a culture that is the result of a failure of the familial unit to confer those particular values and ideas to the next generations. I say it like this, when your kids leave your home to go off to college or to go start their adult lives, they leave with a little box. And their little box is either full of really good ideas, or maybe, some good ideas, some bad ideas, whatever. Or in a lot of cases, it's empty. The goal as parents, I think, should be to fill our kids' belief boxes with really good, solid, very, very difficult to contend with ideas. Meaning, they need to be difficult to contend with. They need to be robust. They need to be explained well so that in the child's mind, they have a strong defense of that position. So that if there's going to be a position or an idea or a belief to cause them to take their box and remove that idea, it's going to have to be heavy. The one coming against it, the one that's going to replace it, needs to be you're raising the bar for the types of ideas that can occupy the territory of your kids' minds. The extent to which you do this gives them defense against bad ideas they're going to encounter in culture. That doesn't happen for a lot of kids. They leave home with an empty box, and so they go off to college, and the first idea that they hear, even mildly well articulated, even semi-robust, even though there's holes all in it, right? They don't have anything good to compare it to. So they immediately adopt these ideas. They fill their box up with them because as far as their semi-rational minds go, and I say semi-rational because we all have semi-rational minds, right? We pursue rationality, but we do it imperfectly and infallibly. In their semi-rational minds, they go, well, this seems to be the most well-articulated idea that I've heard in regards to this particular topic, so I'm going to adopt this idea. And that is, and as parents, and I'm the father to a young girl right now, and she's 5 years old, and I'm already doing the best I can to start having conversations which are intentional and which are teaching her the foundational principles of ideas on which we're going to build a worldview. And the degree to which we do that will positively impact our child's lives, the success they have in life, and the positive impact they have on society. And I don't mean this as a hateful criticism or to be a jerk to anyone, but if your child has gone off to school and they have adopted bad ideas, it's because you failed to fill their box with good, heavy, weighty, meaningful, robust ideas. You didn't build for them a solid worldview on which they could build their lives, but you've got to have one. You got to have one because you have to have a reason as an adult to rationalize decisions that you make. So they're going to build a foundation on which to build their lives. They're going to construct a foundation, an ideological, theological, philosophical foundation on which to build their lives. And if you don't help them do it, they'll do it by themselves. And they'll do it at 18 or 19 years old. If they came from a home that wasn't discussing these things, they'll do it with a severe lack of wisdom. And so they'll build for themselves a faulty foundation on which they'll construct their lives, and the outcome of their lives will be apparent. It will be apparent, the foundation on which they built it, and that their parents failed them. They failed them. And it's a difficult thing because many people who find themselves in positions with 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, they also didn't have parents who helped them build a good foundation. And so they are operating from deficit to the degree that they don't really oftentimes even know exactly why they subscribe to particular worldviews, to particular ideas, to particular positions. We have a responsibility to understand why we believe the things that we believe and why we think that other things that are contrary to those beliefs are fallacious. We have an obligation because our beliefs have consequences. They have consequences for ourselves, for our families and friends, and for society at large. They're very, very, very important.